I like Adonai Mitchell. You guys all know that's one of my guys. For those of you who don't know the Ass God, he like popped up on our radar last year because he was separating at such a high level. And we weren't the only ones who saw that. Reggie Wayne, Hall of Famer, wide receiver coach for the Colts, was asked about Adonai Mitchell and said that. He's like, I think he's separating at the best level of any player in the league. And at the time, that's what our separation data was telling us. The only problem with Adonai Mitchell is like he was awful at everything else. He's shying away from contact, running the wrong routes, doing nothing after the catch, and of course, dropping a number of balls. What?
Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
Fantasy football trade deadline targets. Which players should fantasy managers be trading for? Which players should fantasy managers consider trading away? Scott, we've got the ESPN and Yahoo League default trade deadline. So if you play in a Yahoo League or an ESPN League, your trade deadline is just days away, sometime in the next week. Now, commissioners will adjust that trade deadline, but usually trade deadlines happen before the Thanksgiving Day games, and some of them happen before this Sunday's games. So we're going to talk about the players you should be trading for right here. Theo Gremminger and Scott Barrett on the School of Scott Fantasy Football Podcast on the Fantasy Points Podcast Network. Scott, let's talk about it a little bit. Everything report dropped on Fantasy Points. It's absolute fire. And the first thing you talked about is what's lying heavy on many fantasy managers' minds. The Atlanta Falcons are dropping like flies. Drake London, PCL injury, and Michael Penix looks like he's going to be done for the season. Take a step back, break down how you think this Atlanta offense is going to look, and sort of your takeaways from just an awful fallout.
Yeah, it's disappointing because, things are, they finally got things going. Drake London was looking like one of the biggest league winners you could have drafted. Bijan Robinson looking like an easy top 3, top 4 fantasy running back. London, 100 plus yards in 5 of his last 6 games. Remember how, I was ranting about the Darnell Mooney splits. I know Mooney's been seriously banged up and the home road splits. But a big part of that was just not featuring him in the passing game. And, the play caller did that. And it's not like Michael Penix was that great. He's cleared 250 passing yards once in his last 8 games. I feel like I think there's a chance Kirk Cousins comes in and he's even better. Cause don't forget how, he clearly wasn't right last year. And maybe he's, finally right following the Achilles. Isn't just a total statue in the pocket, but he looked so bad in that Miami Dolphins game. And so, yeah, things are rough. Bijan really held afloat by his work in the passing game at one of the highest levels in the league, and he's great at that, and that's something that should continue, perhaps especially without Drake London. Although he's a bell cow everywhere except for where it matters most, inside the 10-yard line. He is frequently getting pulled. He has less than half as many carries inside the 10 as Tyler Algier. And so what's going to happen until Drake London comes back? We're getting mixed reports. The coach is saying he's week to week, but sort of the insiders are saying multiple weeks, maybe for the rest of the year. I think Kyle Pitts is a fringe top 7, top 8 fantasy tight end. And I know we all have Kyle Pitts PTSD, but it's just a way better role. His route share is way up. He was 19th in route share last year. He's 2nd this year. By target share on aimed throws, he's 2nd or 3rd among all tight ends. He was 25th last year. So it's just a different new role. And then Darnell Mooney, it's tough to make sense of what's going on with him. He has a broken collarbone. He's had that the entire year. He also picked up a hamstring injury in week 4, which is notoriously slow to heal. He is the 2nd least efficient player in fantasy, ahead of only Jerry Jeudy. He ranks 2nd worst in average separation score. It's rough. Yeah. maybe he gets healthier, and Kirk Cousins and him had a great rapport last year, and there's just nowhere else for the ball to go to. But I don't know. I think this is kind of looking like almost a dead offense. You lose Drake London, and yeah, shout out to the Rams who have the Falcons 2026 first round pick. Things are looking rough. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot to unpack there. The Rams having a top 10 pick is going to be absolutely wild. Do they choose to draft Matthew Stafford's successor? I mean, they could go a number of ways.
Class, I don't think.
I don't think so either. And if you want to get an early look, shameless promotion, if you want to get a look at the 2026 class, Brett Whitefield and I dropped our early 2026 top 20 rookie rankings right here at Fantasy Points YouTube. You can go check that out in our previous videos. We're not very bullish on this quarterback class. Only 2 quarterbacks were relatively highly ranked in Superflex there. So breaking down the Atlanta situation, I'm way more pessimistic than you seem to be on Kirk Cousins. I think he's a dead asset. I think he looks like a retired quarterback still playing. I have no expectations for this offense. I have zero expectations for Darnell Mooney. I like what you said about Kyle Pitts. I do think he gets the bump, and I think he's sort of if you need an answer at tight end, he's a player that I think you can trade for, and I think he's going to give you, like you said, realistically speaking, top 8 rest of the season value at the tight end position. The target should be solid. He has potential to have a couple of decent boom weeks just based on the lack of playmakers around him. Bijan's a really interesting one because Bijan had this massive performance here in week 11, but it's been like slow sledding for him in the previous 3 weeks. Like when we talked about him about 6 weeks ago, Scott, it was Bijan versus Jonathan Taylor versus Christian McCaffrey for the RB1 overall. But with Bijan, like if we take away this past week, the 30-point performance, and obviously he played lights out, 4 catches for 39 yards, ran for over 100 yards and 2 scores. Take those games out. You had the Indianapolis game, which was a dud, the Miami game, which was a dud, New England game, he had 17.6 points, and that was really based on the fact that he had 8 catches. Tyler Algier is going to be a threat. I think that the solution to what does Atlanta do is I think we see a ton of Tyler Algier. I think he's a beneficiary of the Drake London injury and also Penix being out of there. And I think with Bijan, we have to look at him as a player to consider trading right now. It's really, really rough to even say that. But the guy's averaging 21 points per game, and Atlanta has had their bye week already. I'll throw out a couple players for you. Would you offer Bijan Robinson to the Devon Achane manager with Miami on their bye? Maybe there's some Achane managers out there that really, really need a win.
Yeah, I don't want to be trading Bijan. Like, this is a premium talent. I think he's fairly, even if this offense is garbage, because he's heavily involved in the passing game, he's sort of immune to that. But Achane is a player I would make that trade. And they are very similar players to me, where they're extremely talented in both phases of the game, heavily utilized in both phases of the game, and both, like I said, losing that near end zone work. But I would give the one thing Bijan had going for him is it looked like a better offense than this Miami Dolphins offense. But now, you lose Drake London, quarterback uncertainty. Yeah, you have to give Achane the edge, who is back to being like his rookie season, one of the most hyper-efficient running backs in football, 5.5 yards per carry, 900 rushing yards. It's like 120 more than Bijan. He also has like 25 more targets, I think, than Bijan. So, yeah, Achane, is a fantasy points favorite, and I would probably make that trade. But there's few others I think you can list unless it's a true premium asset where I would pull that trigger.
Okay, I'll throw one more player that I think is not quite at Achane level, but close to it. Jahmyr Gibbs, where we have more mouths to feed in Detroit.
Oh yeah, give me Gibbs. I mean, we're talking about it goes Jonathan Taylor, CMC, Gibbs, Achane, Bijan, but that's tight. That's like a really tight, and then a big fall off.
Yeah, I think, and I talked to Ryan Heath about this one, where we were sort of both in agreement on the Gibbs and Achane one. I think that's agreed with you. That's about as far as I would go. I'm not going lower than that in the running back position. I think trading Bijan Robinson in like a 2-for-1 to try to get Taylor, 2-for-1 to try to get McCaffrey, that might also be the move. I'm really, really worried about this offense for sure. Let's talk about a couple of other players here. We talked about Kyle Pitts as a potential buy, Bijan as a potential sell high. Let's talk about Derrick Henry. Is Derrick Henry looking like a player that you're looking to trade for to use down the stretch? Scott, you're always posting this stat about how effective Derrick Henry is in December.
Oh yeah, it was Ryan who tweeted it out. He beat me to it, but it's month by month, starting in September, ending in January. It's 4.3 to 4.8 to 4.9 to 5.2 to 6.1 yards per carry. Yeah, he tends to get better as the season drags on, and defenses get a little bit worse, a little scared to go up against Derrick Henry, with their nagging injuries and whatnot. And it's also true with as the games go on, his fourth quarter yards per carry is a lot better than his first quarter yards per carry. But yeah, looking at him, he gets Lamar Jackson back, and he has a great strength of schedule, which is really important to him. He's always been one of the more schedule sensitive quarterbacks, running backs, game script sensitive running backs. The Ravens are heavy favorites in 5 of their next 7 games. They get the Bengals twice over that span. So yeah, he's a pretty great buy low, especially in standard and half point PPR leagues.
Jets this week, and then like you said, those 2 Bengals games. I think Henry's really a sneaky one out here where the volume's been very, very solid, but we haven't seen the massive explosion week. I think that is coming. So I'm absolutely trading for Henry. I've actually made a couple of trades for Derrick Henry in dynasty leagues. It's sort of like an annual tradition where if you are looking like you're going to be a contender, you end up buying Derrick Henry off of some guy that's looking to sell him low. And Scott, Derrick Henry is going to be back next year too. He's not disappearing even at 32 years old. So Derrick Henry makes a lot of sense to trade for in redraft. I also think he's a sneaky buy in dynasty formats. You could see him falling eventually into some sort of a goal line only role or David Montgomery light role in Baltimore if they add another premium back, and it's still being a guy you can put into your flex or your RB2 role. He's just going to age very, very gracefully. Talk about one more running back that I think is interesting. The volume is back with Chase Brown. Your thoughts on Chase Brown as a potential buy? Obviously, last week went very, very poorly with Cincinnati. That Pittsburgh game, complete annihilation. But if we look at Brown, 18 points coming out of the bye week. Scott, that's now 3 straight weeks with 18 points or more. 18 carries for 99 yards, and he had 6 catches for 28 yards.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it looks like his usage is back to being what it was at the tail end of last season, where we were calling him discount CMC, right? He had 99 rushing yards last week and 8 targets. The week before that, he had 14 targets, 75 receiving yards. And yeah, this is all great, but it's largely because Samaje Perine is missing time. Perine's going to miss this week, but then, I don't know, he probably comes back the week after. And so we have to hope that the coaching staff kind of just rides out this uber bell cow workload. But I don't know that they will. So I don't know that I'd call him necessarily a trade for target I would recommend, but play him in DFS this week for sure.
Yeah, and speaking of DFS, today's podcast is sponsored by Fantasy Points Premium, which includes all of our betting and DFS content. We are on an absolute heater, Scott. Started giving out recommended anytime touchdown bets in week 6, and now we're up 30 units in just over the last 6 weeks. To put that in perspective, if you're a $100 bettor, you'd be up $3,000 nearly, $2,960 just betting this particular bet. And over a larger sample size, Justin Barnes is now up 103 units with a 65% hit rate over the last 3 years. Scott, I had a big DFS week this past week. I took number 1 in a couple of contests using our DFS content, using our projections. It's absolutely worth the price of admission. And we have now lowered this price for Fantasy Points Premium down to just $87.50 for the rest of the season. If you know what you're doing in DFS, you are going to pay for this subscription and then some in just 1 week. And this is not a weekly price. This is for the entire season. And if you're listening to this show, you can use the code Theo and get an additional 15% off of all of our packages. Scott, you ran a little pure in your DFS article this past week. used the Jacoby Brissett, Michael Wilson, Trey McBride stack, and then I had Christian McCaffrey, and then I also added George Kittle sort of on my own. But I consulted with you, got in your DMs. I said, what do you think about a McBride with Kittle in the flex? And you signed off on it. So that lineup crushed. I made a ton of money.
You've been killing it.
More.
You're better than I am at DFS, apparently. You, for either 4 weeks in a row or 3 of the last 4 weeks, you are deep into the 4 p.m. games, top 5 in big tournaments. You took one down last week. You had a number of top 10 finishes, some real sweats. You were killing it. No one cares. I know no one cares. But Saturday night, I had my main lineup. I felt great about it. It was a Jacoby Brissett triple with CMC on the bring back. Should have got to Kittle too, but just CMC on the bring back. And I would have won so much money. And then Sunday morning, it felt like a total brain fart. I just pivoted to Josh Allen doubles. Josh Allen did okay, but got the wrong stacking partners there. But yeah, you are on an absolute heater. And it's no surprise we have the most accurate DFS projections in the industry this year. Like you said, we are killing it with recommended bets. Tom Brawley's on fire. Justin Barnes has been 69% or better 3 straight seasons. We started doing the anytime touchdown thing because one of our subscribers was like, hey guys, just so you know, I'm up 25K. So someone in our Discord, you guys should start tracking this. And we did. And so, we're on 5. And so we're literally the best. And we're cheaper than what all these other sites are charging per week for the full season, $87.50. These other sites are $150 per week and more. So we're gonna have to raise prices. Might as well just get in while the getting is good.
Yeah, and if you're looking to get someone a Christmas present, a Hanukkah present, a birthday present, give them the gift of winning fantasy football, the gift of winning DFS. Our Dynasty content is on fire. Dynasty Market Report every single week. I'm writing that one. You're going to get access to that. Scott's Everything Report with Ryan Heath. And then, like you said, big shout out to Chris Wecht, who came on School of Scott this summer. His projections have just been unbelievable this year. So big shout out to the entire team at Fantasy Points. And again, use the code Theo and get 15% off. Let's keep this sort of trade discussion going. But before we do that, I want to talk about a running back that no one's going to recommend you go out and just trade for this player, but we're seeing some positive usage with Kenneth Walker. What are you seeing here post-bye week from Walker? Scott, we started him this past week. Can we at least comfortably put him in our RB2 in our flex moving forward?
Yeah. So I kind of dismissed his big game as just being driven by matchup, because I saw this coming. I played Kenneth Walker in DFS this past week. It's just the way Seattle's offense works and what's been so successful for them. I knew the Rams were going to play them in the complete opposite way. The way that the Rams, every Seattle opponent should have played the Seahawks, basically play the pass instead of playing the run, and it would have opened things up for Kenneth Walker. And so I kind of just dismissed it as it was the matchup and I saw it coming. But you finally had positive coach speak from Mike McDaniel saying, yeah, I think, Kenneth Walker is deserving of more touches moving forward. And this has been obvious to everyone. Zach Charbonnet ranks dead last in success rate, bottom 5 in yards per carry, bottom 5 in EPA per run. Yes, he is getting a lot of the short yardage stuff, goal line stuff. You can control for that. He's still a bottom 5 running back. Kenneth Walker, top 25%, let's say. And it was weird. Week 6, 7, Mike McDaniel was asked about this, and he said, yeah, sometimes things are more important than just success with the ball. And it's like, what? What are you, what are you, I don't know. I've never heard that in my life, but yeah, at a certain point, hopefully logic prevails, and the more talented, the more successful, more efficient runner is going to start getting more touches.
Yeah, I agreed. And Walker looks like a player that at least we're going to be able to use in our flex down the stretch. Scott, we've had a couple of players we've lost from FFPC main event teams. Walker is going to be locked into at least one lineup for us. So I'm hoping that this is the start of something. It was great seeing him score a touchdown. Not great week for Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold with 4 interceptions this past week, by far his worst week of the year. And then on the flip side, let's talk about the Rams. This was a big Kyren Williams week. Kyren Williams entered the top 10 rushers of all time for LA or for Rams history. Had a touchdown, had two long 30-yard runs. But let's talk about the wide receivers. I think this is a great trading opportunity with Davante Adams, and you also have some Puka Nacua takes here.
Yeah, it pains me to say this, but Puka Nacua is looking like a sell high. His route share since the bye has been at 62%, 62%, 68%. Before that, he was routinely 85 to 90%. And what happened? It's the Rams really stealing from the Seahawks and what they were doing, has been playing a lot more heavy personnel. Really a lot of 13 personnel. So Puka went down with an injury week 6, week 7. They were like, hey, let's try this out. They were at 0%. Week 7, they go to 40%. It works. It looks good. And then since then, they've been about 60% every single week. And 13 personnel, for those who don't know, it's 1 wide receiver on the field, 3 tight ends. It is great to be that wide receiver because when your target competition is tight ends, it's a lot easier to get the ball than it is against 2 or more wide receivers sharing the field with you. And Puka's just not seeing the field. He's not that lone wide receiver in ISO. It's typically Davante Adams. Last week, it was Davante Adams at the 90% route share in 13 personnel. And so that's really the catalyst here behind Puka's declining route share. And it kind of makes sense, just given the beating he puts his body through, his play style. Maybe you want to give him some more plays off. This is still like a really valuable asset. So it's like the Bijan thing where, maybe it feels like we're being nitpicky here. But if you can get a premium asset for a Puka Nacua, if you can get a Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown, I would look into making that trade and see where your league mate is valuing Puka. Maybe you can get a little extra thrown on top as well. And then sell high a little bit. And then I think Davante Adams is a bit of a buy low.
Okay, so we're going to get back to Davante Adams. Let me give you a couple of real-world scenarios. You mentioned Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think that one makes sense to a lot of people. He's a alpha wide receiver 1. Laporta's injured. Let's talk about Rashee Rice. Offer Puka Nacua straight up for Rashee Rice. Are you there on that one? With Rice coming off of a really poor outing in terms of, it was sort of the nightmare scenario that you've talked about on the show, where he had a few receptions, but very minimal receiving yardage. It seems like the right time to sort of buy Rice. And I think I could get Rashee Rice plus for Puka Nacua. Are you there on that one?
Oh, man. Yeah, probably. Rashee had a bad game, but it was, he's still 20% target share, which he's done in 11 of 12 games. I think it was just the third time over his last 12 games he fell under 17 fantasy points. What happened? Ryan would tell you it was a very man-heavy matchup, and Rashee Rice struggles against man. He's not going to face too many more matchups like that. I would say it's just the Broncos. They sell out to stop an opposing team's number 1 receiver. You saw that against Brock Bowers. So either way, I really wouldn't read too much into that performance. And yeah, he's probably another good buy low.
Yeah, and I think with when we're talking about Puka Nacua, the Jamar Chase trade makes sense now because Chase managers had to deal with last week, and now they're going to have to deal with Jamar Chase being suspended for a week. And then 2 weeks ago was Jamar Chase's bye week. So there's going to be a lot of Jamar Chase managers, and also the Jake Browning situation where it was sort of a couple sporadic scoring weeks. Jamar Chase managers might be desperately needing a win this week, and I think this is the potential pivot. Offer Puka Nacua for Jamar Chase, see if they bite. I think that's the interesting one. You heard Scott's take on Rice. Let's talk about Davante Adams. I traded Ricky Pearsall for Davante Adams in a big dynasty league where I'm a contender to get that scoring down the stretch. I think those sort of trades are out there for you in dynasty because of his age. Redraft, he becomes a lot more interesting, but I still think he's a buy pretty much everywhere. Your thoughts on Adams and what you're seeing usage-wise?
You are a madman in dynasty.
Listen, I'm out in the streets. I'm out in the streets making money. I'm not This is not theoretical dynasty conversation. If you're reading my dynasty content, I put the real world trades out there. I made a couple of heavy trades last week. I made a trade you might not like. I'll throw another one out at you. Not to get too trade talky for dynasty. We're trying to keep it redraft focused here, but on an FFPC dynasty team, I traded Tucker Kraft, who I'm very high on in dynasty, to get Javonte Williams. And I had a couple people who hated the trade, but it's a contender. It's a contender, and I get that 15 points a game down the stretch from Javonte. The usage. Sometimes you got to take a haircut.
I mean, if you win the championship this year, your buy-in's paid for 12 years, right? It's something like that.
Yeah, so you get paid nicely in these FFPC leagues, and holding those injured assets.
There's just like no worse feeling in dynasty than 2 years from now having all these declining assets and you're just stuck in no man's land, and you're going to be bad for years. Like Davante Adams just. While you see Pearsall and Kraft, going nuclear.
Are you going to ever see Pearsall going nuclear?
I'm bullish. Yeah, I like Pearsall.
So we'll see. It remains to be seen. Yeah. He needs to stay healthy, but he needs to be healthy is right. With Tucker Kraft, I think it's going to happen long term. It looked like, but there's always a chance that this was the best it's going to be. The offseason, you could see Green Bay bring in a true alpha wide receiver one. At some point, they're going to do it. They're going to either luck into some guy in the draft or, even in the LaFleur offense could change. So anyway, those were just sort of the trades I'm making. Make sure you read the Dynasty Market Report. I'm going to give a couple of Dynasty trade targets for specifically FFPC managers. That deadline is coming up this weekend. A couple of last-minute trade targets. But let's talk about Adams from a redraft lens. What are the kind of trades you'd be looking to make for Adams? A couple of players you would look to pivot off of to get Adams.
So let me just make my case for him. He's been popping as a top XFP related value for quite a while, just, sort of underperforming his volume-based expectation. He had a 0.1 yards per target average last week, but he also picked up his 7th touchdown in 4 games. He really has one of the most valuable roles in fantasy that's become even stronger with the rise of these this 13 personnel where he's the lone wide receiver in those sets, like I said. But he's 4th in deep targets, leads all wide receivers in red zone targets, end zone targets by a mile. He's the wide receiver 3 by XFP per game. But only the wide receiver 8 by fantasy points per game. And so you can argue he's lost a step. That might be what's going on. But I dug into it. He ranks behind only JSN and AS. So he's still separating at a really high level. It's just he's kind of run bad on target accuracy. He leads the league in uncatchable XFP per game, unbelievably ahead of Justin Jefferson, Jerry Jeudy. And with Matthew Stafford playing at an MVP caliber level, you have to think that just sort of regresses to the mean. Some of these really valuable targets, these end zone targets, these deep targets, are going to start being more catchable than they've been. And Adams starts to produce at a higher level, but he's already producing at a low end wide receiver 1 clip. So yeah, who am I trading Adams for? That's a good question.
Well, I'll give you a couple of real world scenarios that I think could be out there for you.
Because you're in the streets.
I'm in the streets. This is, again, we're trying to make money here. Okay, I'll throw out T. Higgins, who's been on a touchdown streak.
Yeah, I'd take Adams.
I'd take Adams as well. Okay,
you might want to wait until after this week without Chase, the suspension.
That's a very, very good point.
Sell a little bit higher.
Here's another one. The counting stats in most weeks have been pretty strong. We talked about him on previous School of Scott episodes, and a true wide receiver 1 for his team, Michael Pittman or Davante Adams.
Oh, Pittman. I mean, easy. Adams. Sorry. Adams, easy.
Easy yeah. Adams.
Yeah.
Okay, Chris Olave, who has the second most
Adams
targets.
Easy again.
Adams easy again. Okay, here's a tricky one for you. And this player we were also going to talk about as a potential buy. Really hard question for you. And a player that I hope runs pure because we have him on a number of teams that we share. Jalen Waddle.
I think I would go Adams again.
Talk about Waddle, though, because I know you wrote about him in the Everything Report to put a little context to this one. It's a difficult decision.
Yeah, so he fell under 80 receiving yards for just the second time in 7 games since Tyreek went down. The first game, was a bad weather game. This game, what was it? he had a 35% target share. He's been over 33% back-to-back weeks. It's just Miami has really shifted to this Achane centric, run heavy centric offense. So he where their P-row went from, I don't know, top 6 to bottom 5. So he looks like a mid-range wide receiver 2 to me, on a team that I don't think is going to score a lot of touchdowns. But there's going to be weeks where he's more of a low end mid-range wide receiver 1 if it's a pass funnel spot, or they're going to be trailing throughout. So that's kind of how I read Waddle. I just see a little bit more upside with Adams, with Stafford playing at the level he's at.
Okay, I'll make another Davante Adams trade. Rome Odunze or Davante Adams?
Yeah, I'd go Adams.
I'd go Adams as well. Okay, now here's one, and I'd love to get Graham Barfield on for this one because I think I know where he would go, and it would make a lot of people very angry. Davante Adams or Justin Jefferson?
I would still go with Jefferson, but it is rough out here in these streets with Justin Jefferson.
Justin Jefferson, I wrote about in the Dynasty Market Report last week as a guy who's lost some dynasty value, Scott. It's not looking good in Minnesota. Shout out to Brett Whitefield, who's still bullish and optimistic on J.J. McCarthy.
The only person in the world.
I'm getting less and less optimistic on J.J. McCarthy. But anybody
Dude,
who wants to...
all-time worst miss, like my quarterback track record is damn good. All-time worst miss, Zach Wilson. I was a big believer in him coming out. I just saw, the wow plays, and J.J. McCarthy is looking like Zach Wilson 2.0. It is rough.
Brett still has his heels dug in, but any Brett Whitefield, anybody who wants to be a hater on Brett's J.J. McCarthy takes, he also gave you Jackson Dart well over Cam Ward. We were the only site that had that. So big shout out to Brett.
His hit rate's great. Yeah, he's allowed one miss, and honestly, given his hit rate, you should be a McCarthy believer.
That's what I've said as well. And this is now the time I think in Dynasty you can get McCarthy for the price of quarterback 30 in Dynasty. People are ready to sell very, very cheap. Justin Jefferson conversation, an interesting one. I'm still going Jefferson over Adams. Like you talked about last week, and our episode we recorded last week where we talked about fantasy football playoff strength of schedule. If you didn't listen to that one, it was absolute fire. Minnesota does have a schedule that could be conducive to Justin Jefferson putting up some really big weeks, theoretically, if J.J. McCarthy can just be normal. And Scott, we've got a near 7-point underdogs this week against Green Bay. The market, it really thinks Green Bay is going to woodshed Minnesota in this one. So very, very interesting one there. Make sure you're checking out Scott's Everything Report. That's where we're getting most of the content here for School of Scott podcast. It's appointment reading every single week. Ryan Heath and Scott Barrett. It's like 20 pages long, Scott, every week. It's the amount of work you guys put into it is fantastic. And again, you can get access to the Everything Report with any single Fantasy Point subscription. Use the code Theo and get 15% off. Again, makes a great, great present this time of year. Scott, let's keep this thing going. Stir the echoes. Christian Watson looks like he's back. Now, this one is interesting because I think I can buy Christian Watson for pretty cheap in all formats. In Dynasty, people are scared to death because of the injury history. And in redraft, people might not believe it. You also have I don't want to have any Matt LaFleur pass catcher in my lineup because the usage could end up being messed up. But Watson's starting to look like vintage Watson. 2 touchdown grabs, and had him in my DFS lineup last week. So let's talk about him.
Yeah, I mean, you could take this two ways. Matt LaFleur's history. You could say he doesn't have more than 5 targets in any game this year. You could also argue, hey, he's had at least 45 receiving yards in all 4 games. He's averaging nearly 60 yards per game despite starting the season as a part-time player coming off of injury. And he's really good. He's really talented, and no Tucker Kraft kind of opens the offense up, kind of forces Green Bay to look at the receivers. His route share is really high. That was always the big issue with Christian Watson. Remember his rookie season, he was insanely hyper efficient on a per touch basis, on a per route basis. He just wasn't a full-time player. He is now these last 2 weeks. I'm kind of into Watson, and also even Romeo Doubs, who the target share has been really high these last few weeks, atypically high for him, and he is always featured near the end zone. I had this gut call on Christian Watson. I was talking to Ryan Heath about it. I was like, I don't know why. I just think this was back, before there were any vibes he would return in season, let alone back in like August. I was like, I don't know. I just feel like Watson's going to go crazy throughout the fantasy playoffs. And so I don't know, gut vibes, maybe, guardian angel whispering in my ear, something like that. We'll see. My gut's usually pretty good. I feel like the only reason I was saying that though is just because like it wouldn't make any sense. Like the one year Watson goes off is like the one year he shouldn't. Coming off of this devastating injury, they drafted a rookie wide receiver round 1, but the dude is talented, bottom line, and so dynamic playmaker. He in the everything report, I talked about a bunch of these guys who I think are worthy of just holding on to your bench and seeing what happens. Jacoby Myers, Rashid Shaheed, Luther Burden, et cetera, et cetera. And Christian Watson's for sure one of those guys, not a guy to start yet, but sort of just hold and wait and see and monitor usage trends.
So for me, I like Watson because we haven't seen, again, like you said, it's a really difficult player to start and trust in redraft because he has had 4 targets in 3 games, and then this past week he had 5 targets. Hasn't had more than 4 catches in any game. This past week he did hit with the 2 touchdown grabs, but the schedule down the stretch just lends itself towards Green Bay might be forced to get into some shootout environments. Week 17 versus Baltimore in Green Bay. This has been a game that Graham Barfield and I have liked, like even before the season, as a potential sneaky shootout type game. They have Chicago twice, week 14 and week 16. And then we have the Thanksgiving Day game in week 13 at Detroit. That's one where we sort of have that one circled, Scott. You can just sort of see it coming where Detroit puts a lot of pressure on Green Bay to sort of keep up. Detroit has a revenge game narrative. Green Bay smoked them the first game. Now they get to play them in Detroit on Thanksgiving. I'm just into Christian Watson. And if you're in a situation where you don't like your wide receiver 3, you don't like your flex, it's sort of like a discount Jameson Williams situation with Watson, where it's the player that could make it happen on one big play and sort of help you win your week. Yeah, I'm sort of into him. Another player who I would throw in this line of interesting trade target, and I wonder if we see this player ramped up down the stretch. Troy Franklin is operating as a wide receiver 1 in Denver. We've talked about this on a number of School of Scots. We've sort of been first to market on this one weeks and weeks and weeks ago. But post-bye week, this Denver offense could look a little bit different. The run game was sort of ineffective against the Kansas City Chiefs, and we expected that. This is a difficult defense. R.J. Harvey with 14 touches, Jaleel McLaughlin with 7 of them. I think it's going to be R.J. Harvey coming out of the bye week about the same split. Tyler Bidet was completely non-existent, but Pat Bryant had sort of a breakout performance, and it looks like Troy Franklin as the wide receiver 1 with Courtland Sutton taking a back seat as the 2, and then Pat Bryant sort of being the wild card. But with Troy Franklin, he's sort of the best bet here when it comes to Denver. Your thoughts on Franklin, trading for him during his bye week?
Yeah, I mean he's for sure the clear number 1 now. He's led the team in target share in 5 straight games. Really good target quality as well. He has 335 more air yards than any wide receiver not named Alec Pierce over that span. 10th in targets per game, 8th in XFP per game, 15th in fantasy points per game. He's another guy like Davante Adams, another guy like Mika Egbuka I was talking about, where he's kind of running bad on, the quarterback isn't doing him any favors. He ranks bottom 10 in catchable target rate over this span. Over the previous span, I think he was bottom 2. And so, yeah, if that continues to improve, I don't see why Franklin can't put up numbers similar to what we saw from Courtland Sutton in the second half last year, where he was what, a high-end wide receiver 2 over that span?
Yeah, Courtland Sutton was running as like a wide receiver 1 in a number of those weeks. I sort of love where your head's at. The only, I would say the only warning to our trade for Troy Franklin is fantasy playoffs week 17. You have Kansas City in Kansas City. And then you in week 15, you get the Packers in Green Bay. So and Jaguars are kind of a sneaky defense. Occasionally, they really show up. We saw what they did to the Chargers this past week. So difficult fantasy football playoff schedule. But we do get week 13 and week 14 Commanders and Vegas Raiders. So you could get some points there with Troy Franklin. And again, you get the discount because he's on the bye week this week. Let's keep this going. Obvious trade candidate. If you can trade for Stefon Diggs, I think I'm doing it. We're very high on Drake Maye. Diggs coming off of a really good performance this past week. He had almost a season high with 9 catches. He had his third 100-yard receiving game of the season. 11 targets, Scott. Got to be feeling pretty good about Diggs. Now you get him coming up in week 12 against the Bengals. Then you get the Giants in week 13. Baltimore in week 16, and then the Jets again in week 17, a team that he just smoked. I love trying to trade for Diggs in Dynasty too, because he's just I know you don't like trading for these old guys, but if you're going for the money, Stefon Diggs goes right into your lineup, helps you get there.
Yeah, I mean, there's a chance this is just like a week-to-week roller coaster ride where it's like a different guy every week, especially when Kayshon Boutte comes back. But I think he's very underrated league-winning potential. The guy ranks 8th among all wide receivers in fantasy points per route run. He just had an 89% route share. That was up from 67%. And so, maybe they were just kind of taking it easy on him, coming off of ACL surgery and, playoffs are getting closer every week. Now it's time to ramp him up. Now it's time for him to be a full-time player. Now it's time for him to be featured in the offense. And so just the range of outcomes there, he looks like a good player to target.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that one. Let's talk about a couple of under-the-radar guys now. One player who you don't need to trade for, but you can go ahead and pick him up off your waiver wire. He's in the waiver wire article that I write. Drops every single week over at fantasypoints.com. Adonai Mitchell. Now we see Tyrod Taylor taking over at quarterback. Adonai's just an interesting one to keep on your bench, sort of see where this situation goes. How do you think this offense is going to change? Obviously, things are not good in New York. But how do you think this offense is going to look with Taylor behind center?
I'm bullish. I'm probably more bullish than like anyone on the planet. I like Tyrod. I'm a Tyrod truther. You look at the catchable throw rate, Fields versus Tyrod. It's night and day. From the little we have seen from Tyrod over the last 5 years, one of the best catchable throw rates. You look at him over his last 4 starts, 273 passing yards per game. It's like double Fields, 37.8 rushing yards per game, which is more than Jackson Dart. There's like a chance. Well, they don't have anyone to throw to. So like really like this offense is dead. It's just not quite as dead as the Titans. But I like Adonai Mitchell. You guys all know that's one of my guys. For those of you who don't know the Ass God, he like popped up on our radar last year because he was separating at such a high level. And we weren't the only ones who saw that. Reggie Wayne, Hall of Famer, wide receiver coach for the Colts, was asked about Adonai Mitchell and said that. He's like, I think he's separating at the best level of any player in the league. And at the time, that's what our separation data was telling us. He dropped down to maybe, top 7. The only problem with Adonai Mitchell is like he was awful at everything else. He's shying away from contact, running the wrong routes, doing nothing after the catch, and of course, dropping a number of balls. And what happened against, his debut for the Jets, it was just a signature Ass God performance, 6 targets, 10 yards. He dropped half of those targets, but he separated at a really high level. There's just no one else. And so I think it behooves the Jets to kind of see what they have in this guy, if they can, sort of reclamation project, if they could turn him into a thing. And I think deep leagues, keeper leagues, he's a guy to stash. He's a guy I'm stashing, just, my biases. But yeah, it definitely could be the case. He's just really good at separation, and he just kind of sucks at everything else.
Yeah, I think he's interesting because I think from a long-term lens, he has a chance to be the wide receiver 2 when New York takes the field at the beginning of the 2026 season. They seem to like him. It's sort of found money for them as like a throw in like the Sauce Gardner trade. But they seem to like him, and he has been getting a couple targets. So yeah, Tyrod Taylor. It'll be interesting to see what he has. I mean, I think that the hope for fantasy managers is Tyrod can target Breece Hall out of the backfield, and we get some Breece Hall games down the stretch. Let's stay at the wide receiver position. This is a player that'll be impossible to trade for at this point. But your thoughts on Tetairoa McMillan? Is he going to be a player that's going to help fantasy managers win championships this season? I said on the Fantasy Football Daily podcast, I do the takeaways episode that drops every single Monday here on Fantasy Points YouTube and on the podcast feed, that this was like the real, like the game you wanted to see from McMillan, because for a lot of the season, the usage has just been incredible, and we've been waiting for a spike week performance like this for a player that just projects to be an alpha wide receiver one. I love the way McMillan looked. 2 touchdown grabs, obviously, north of 30 PPR points. Is this something that's going to be, I mean, obviously not sustainable getting this sort of level of production, but can he be a wide receiver one for the rest of the season?
I really hope so. I'd say probably not. This, for those who don't remember, this was my Exodia of all Exodias, where I was almost like, no price is too high. And like now he is, paying off his ADP. But it's just, I just hate this offense. Like this, what he showed you last week, he caught 8 of 12 targets for 130 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like that's what happens if he were in a top 5 offense instead of a bottom 2 offense. Bryce Young, 448 passing yards. That's incredible. Good for him. But that's just his second game over 200 all season. Just his third game of his career over 300. And even with that, they still rank ahead of only the Jets in passing yards per game. I don't really trust this offense being closer to average than bottom 3, unfortunately. And so to me, he is, I don't know, a mid-range wide receiver 2 in this offense. But if he were on the 49ers, the Bills, the Chiefs, the Cardinals, this would be an easy mid-range wide receiver 1. This is just an incredible talent.
I think this week's going to be very telling. This is a matchup where Bryce Young, we're going to talk about Jacoby Brissett in a little bit, but Bryce Young coming off of a massive performance, Tetairoa McMillan coming off of a massive performance, and the 49ers are going to put a ton of pressure on them. This game sort of looks like it could be a sneaky shootout. I think we could get a McMillan north of 20 point per game, north of 20 points week, and I think that would be really, really big to see. I think I'm a little bit more bullish on him rest of the season than you are. If you have him in your lineup, be really excited about this one. And I think what will be interesting is the Tetairoa McMillan versus Emeka Egbuka discussions when we get to the end of the season and heading into the offseason. I mean, the answer is probably both. Both are going to be really, really trendy guys to select in your draft heading into 2026. But a lot of people wanted to write the narrative that Egbuka is the wide receiver 1 in this class. McMillan, I think, is going to make this a real conversation rest of the season. And we'll talk about Egbuka in a minute. One other wide receiver I got to pick your brain on is A.J. Brown. So we get an 11 target A.J. Brown week, but it results in hardly anything. 7 catches for 49 yards. This was a season high in targets for Brown. It's just been a terrible season. One of the worst draft picks you could have made. Certainly Brian Thomas Jr. was an awful pick in that range. But A.J., where you were taking him in like the second round, just a catastrophic pick this year, Scott. Or do you have hope? Now, we have the dream matchup here in Week 12 against Dallas. We saw Trey Tucker score a touchdown on Monday Night Football. Dallas game screams that it could end up being the fantasy-friendly one, but I don't know. It's hard to trust AJ right now.
Yeah, it's really rough. He ranked behind only Puka in yards per route run last season. This year he ranks 36. He can point the blame on him not getting the ball enough. I don't really think that's true. He ranks top 10 in target share, but he's 32nd in yards per game. By yards per target over expectation, he went from top 5 to bottom 5. He's not separating. He was second best in separation win rate a season ago. He's outside of the top 40 this year. And so you have Jeff Mueller, injury expert, Jesse Morse, injury expert, Ted Wynn, film expert, all these guys on Twitter the past few days saying they think he's lost a step. And they don't think this is surprising. Mueller and Morse both sort of predicted this a number of years ago, given his injury history. In the second half of last season, he said he had to get his knee drained every single week. And yeah, I think that's kind of what the data is telling you. Like that, this was a player, I don't know that I was any higher or lower on than industry consensus, but had him really high. And it's really surprised me. And I do think this is the best explanation for what's going on.
Not everyone ages gracefully in fantasy football. I think like with a lot of these wide receiver ones, like the Davante Adams, the Tyreek Hills, we have this expectation that we're going to get some really strong seasons, at least one or two of them when you get to 30 years old, north of it. Davante Adams is doing it at 32. Keenan Allen still playing at 33. AJ turns 29 this offseason. It'll be interesting to see the sort of longevity with AJ Brown. Very, very explosive player.
It's the wear and tear is really like, remember Juju Smith-Schuster? Like,
yes,
he was done at 25. Why? Because, he's young in age, but his knees were like worse than any you'd find in a nursing home. And so that could be what's going on with AJ Brown. It's just not the same, and he's lost a step.
Yeah, very, very disappointing season from AJ. It'll be interesting to see if he can at least get one big week this week against Dallas. 11 targets, definitely a positive. Nico Collins, we talked about him a couple weeks ago, very disappointed with how the season was going. The last 3 weeks have been fantastic for Nico, specifically the last 2 weeks. What are you seeing here in this offense with Mills behind center?
It's sort of like a Jacoby Brissett-like effect. This passing game has been awesome with Davis Mills. They're averaging 253 catchable air yards per start. CJ Stroud averaged 140.9. And so when you have that, you just have way more potential for fantasy production from the receiving core. And yeah, Nico Collins, he's hit 24 DraftKings fantasy points in back-to-back games, 12.5 targets per game. Over his last 15 with Stroud, he hit that mark just once, averaged 7.5 targets per game. And so I don't know how real this is. Like, I think if you talk to anyone working in an NFL front office, they would tell you CJ Stroud is so much better than Davis Mills. But I mean, it's been great for Nico. It's been great for fantasy. And yeah, what is it? He has twice as many games over 270 passing yards as CJ Stroud in the last calendar year. He's only made 2 starts. Part of that, I think, is volume. They've been more pass heavy, but I don't know. What I will say about Nico is just like, it's one of those things that doesn't make sense to me because he's so talented. He should be totally, quarterback immune. And he did start to get a surge in volume. I think the 2 weeks before became the Davis Mills show. But yeah, so this week, Thursday Night Football, Stroud's going to sit out. I have Nico as a mid-range wide receiver 1. And then Stroud comes back. I think he has to still be a mid-range wide receiver 1, low-end wide receiver 1 until proven otherwise.
Yeah, it's a really positive for Nico Collins, I think. Obviously, Nico Collins early in the season looked like it was going to be a complete dud pick. But if you were able to tread water with Nico and you took him at the beginning of the second round, maybe at that 1-2 turn, and you were somehow like a team with like a 500 record, now you've got a shot in the shootout. It's going to be interesting when you get to like Best Ball Mania, FFPC main event, those Nico Collins teams that sneak in. Depending on the rest of your roster, it's a really valuable player to have, Scott, because he won't be a player with a high number of managers rostering him. He's shown you he's capable of putting up spike weeks, and Mills, it's been positivity there. Dalton Schultz is now 3rd among all tight ends in targets on the season. Nico Collins, like you said, just cooking. So I'm optimistic on Nico Collins providing like an edge here. And like you said, it's just another one of these situations where Mills' success in terms of fantasy points, you're like, where is that at with CJ Stroud? So definitely a frustrating one for CJ Stroud fantasy managers. Let's talk about another quarterback and wide receiver situation. Last week, we were really, really excited about the usage with Emeka Egbuka and the post-bye week performance for Baker Mayfield. So let's backtrack to Mayfield. Week 7 and week 8 were sort of catastrophic. The guy was a low-end QB2. The New Orleans game, the Detroit game, goes to bye week, then comes back. New England game, Baker gave you a 3-touchdown performance, finished as QB7 on the week. This past week, okay against Buffalo, but it feels like we've lost a big edge with Baker Mayfield from last year. Last year, he was unbelievable, north of 40 passing touchdowns. This year, he's sort of hovering at that QB1, QB2 line. Can we trust Baker Mayfield rest of the season? If you're rostering Baker Mayfield, are you going to consider trading to try to get an improvement at your quarterback situation?
Yeah, I mean, I was not bullish on Baker too much heading into the year. I love the player, but he doesn't really run enough. He was due for a major touchdown regression. Now he doesn't have Mike Evans. And so, yeah, the numbers look rough. If you look at it, especially by catchable air yards, it's been an issue all year, and it's gotten a little bit worse in recent weeks. I talked to Jeff Mueller, injury expert, who thinks Mayfield is dealing with still the oblique injury that popped up a number of weeks ago, and that's impacting him. You could write off last week's performance due to 20-plus mile-per-hour winds, but I don't know. It looks rough. I think even with Chris Godwin getting back, I'm not bullish Godwin's going to be anything close to who he was last year at any point this season. And it's had this trickle-down effect on Emeka Egbuka where, before his injury, he was a top 3 fantasy points per game wide receiver with just like low-end wide receiver 2 volume. And then since he's returned, he's like had high-end wide receiver 2 volume, or high-end wide receiver 1 volume, and it's been low-end wide receiver 2 production. And so what's going on? Is it just like regression hitting him? Is it, it took him a while to get fully back from the hamstring? Was it just, variance and the win game last week? But digging into it, yeah, he went from having one of the highest catchable target rates in the league to one of the lowest. And so if Baker is dealing with this oblique, and that's why he's not playing well, yeah, that's going to have a trickle-down effect on the receivers.
Yeah, it's really an interesting one for Egbuka. I like what you guys wrote about in the Everything Report. Would you consider pivoting from Baker Mayfield to acquiring Jacoby Brissett, who just set an NFL record with 47 completions in a game? Crazy question to ask, but Brissett is running pure right now. He's running pure right now, Scott. He's a locked-in QB1 in my opinion.
Yeah, I just don't think I can let myself make that trade, but I probably will have Brissett ranked higher this week.
Yeah, I mean, Brissett, he's locked in. They can't run the ball. The pass volume is fantastic. Yeah, and he's producing in garbage time. I think it's a little more trustworthy at this point. Now they lost DeMercado. I think it's going to be even more pass happy. I think Brissett is a great trade target. It feels like Joe Flacco 2023. It feels a little bit like Jameis Winston 2024. It feels weird to even talk about it, but I think Jacoby Brissett realistically is somewhere around QB 10 rest of the season. I'll be very interested to see where Graham Barfield has him ranked when we drop our rest of season rankings update. You can access those over at fantasypoints.com. But Graham's had a great track record with this one. It feels funny to say. I think with Brissett, I want to be open-minded to rostering 2 quarterbacks, but in the positive matchups, I'm going to use him with confidence. So we're there. One thing that Brissett's done, we'll get to Trey McBride in a second, but he's elevated a secondary pass catcher, Scott. And this past week, we saw Michael Wilson go absolutely nuts. 18 targets, 15 catches. It was the most targets for a wide receiver one of the highest target totals for a wide receiver this season. What does the Michael Wilson performance say to you? Is this like a Marvin Harrison Jr. is a huge buy, or is this Marvin Harrison Jr. is just a huge disappointment?
Well, that's kind of how I framed it in the Everything Report. Is I don't think we know that answer. I think it's sort of a combination. Is Marvin Harrison Jr. just this massive bust? because he hadn't hit 100 receiving yards all season. Michael Wilson, 185. That's the most by any wide receiver in any game this season. I will say, to be fair, this is just the second career game Michael Wilson had over 15 and a half fantasy points. And so was this just a flash in the pan? Is this something to chase? Do we want to roster Michael Wilson? Or is Marvin Harrison Jr. going to come back, hit the ground running, smash? The production wasn't really there, but the volume was great for him with Jacoby Brissett. I'm probably more inclined to say Harrison's, going to get a big bump once he comes back. But there's a chance that's wrong.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. I think Harrison's an interesting one. He probably misses this week. I'm just guessing. Usually with like an appendectomy, doesn't seem like something that you'd be back on an NFL field right away after missing only one game. So I think Michael Wilson, if Harrison Jr.'s out, use Michael Wilson this week. And if Harrison Jr.'s back, it'll be interesting to see if he can absorb some of that target volume. Again, I think this team's going to be very, very pass happy. We'll end the show with this one, Scott. Got to talk about Trey McBride. Is he the all-time Exodia tight end based on the situation he has this season and based on the gap between him and tight end 2 overall?
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is insane. It's really incredible. Jacoby Brissett totally unlocking Trey McBride. Since Brissett took over, 11 targets per game, 24.5 fantasy points per game. That would lead all wide receivers, all tight ends. In tight end premium leagues, 28.7. That's 7.2 more than Jamar Chase. And so a note I had was his week 17 matchup is the Bengals, who are giving up 4.4 more fantasy points per game to tight ends than any other defense. And that's scary. That is scary to not have Trey McBride on your roster, potentially face McBride against the Bengals in your championship week, especially in these tight end premium leagues that we're in. I mean, what was it, week 5? I was saying we're never going to chase a round 1, round 2 tight end in fantasy ever again. And I don't know, Trey McBride could be, going above Jamar Chase in some drafts next year. So, that's kind of how I'm seeing it.
Trey McBride is now on pace for 120 receptions this season, which would set an NFL record at the tight end position. I think he's going to break Zach Ertz's record, Scott. He's completely locked in. And a number of tight end 1 overall finishes in a row. This is not like the guy gives you any sort of duds. It's like every single week he's scoring. He's also at 18 points per game, north of 18 points per game. I think there's a chance that he ramps up and ends up being a 20-point per game player by the end of the season, which is incredibly, incredibly rare at the tight end position. Kelsey did it once, and that's the last tight end to do it. So Trey McBride, if you got him, you're feeling like you have a massive, massive edge in fantasy football. Covered a lot here, Scott. What else do you have going on the rest of the week?
Yeah, well, you know how it is. Just pivot to DFS. Going to write the slate breakdown. Going to do Outside the Box on Saturday, the Sunday show with Johnny, and that's what I'm doing. What about you, Theo?
Yeah, I got Dynasty Life. I've got Fantasy Football Daily. I've got the Dynasty Market Report dropping. Just grinding through, and then obviously listening in on your DFS stuff. What game are we chasing? Well, give us a couple games you got circled now that you're interested in. I know you haven't fully broken it down yet, but give the School of Scott listeners at least one game you got circled.
Colts, Chiefs, Patriots, Bengals, Giants, Lions. Ooh,
Giants,
Buccaneers,
Lions,
Rams, Eagles, Cowboys. Oh, we got some fun games this week.
Okay, are we building any lineups with Tyrod Taylor against Baltimore on the dirt cheap Tyrod Taylor?
Man, I probably not. Maybe in like a $3 tournament, I'll throw an Ascod plus Tyrod stack.
Yeah, if you don't have at least one Adonai Mitchell, Tyrod Taylor, Derrick Henry lineup in a $3 tournament, are you even playing DFS? Make sure you check out all the DFS content Scott's dropping. Big shout out to our DFS team. Big shout out to our projections team. They're on fire. Make sure you're checking out fantasypoints.com. We're everywhere here at Fantasy Points. Only a few weeks left. We're going to help you crush your fantasy playoffs this season.